And so the reason we do this is it syncs the video with the audio, and it gives the audio guy and the video guy a point to align.
Perfect.
So that's. But you were talking about Kundalini yoga, which I'm very interested in.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that for?
July.
July.
Yeah.
And let me back up for our viewers. Welcome, Alex, to the podcast. Thanks for being on, my friend.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it.
I'm excited. So.
Me too.
Back to Kundalini yoga. You've been doing it for how long again?
Since July.
Since July.
Like, about 5-6 months on and off.
And in that practice, what primarily are you doing? Or like what are you doing now? And like what's the progression of the practice?
Well, it's when you say what am I doing now, like, I mean, what do you mean specifically?
I mean, like, what's a typical practice look like for you?
Oh, okay. So it's we do certain stretches. It's nothing like hatha, or it's nothing like what we're used to. It's nothing flow or anything.
Yeah.
It's just basically activation and more dynamic movements.
Okay.
Right. So it's not there's not really a flow. It just depends on the instructor. But we do a lot of different types of breath work. That is a primary thing, at least that I've noticed at my studio. There is breath work. For instance, there's one called Breath of Fire, which it's not really the greatest. It's just it's depending on what kind of stretch you do as well with the Breath of Fire. It can be really annoying.
So what's breath of? Can you demo now?
So it's just you're like that, and you focus on the inhale and the exhale. Or
Yes.
sorry, you focus on the exhale and the inhale. What happens? So it's like, and then it's just very short. It's almost like hyperventilating, but not. But if you are hyperventilating, then that's not recommended. But it's just, but you're conscious of your breath, right? And we'll do it in certain poses, right? Like, for instance, this is ego eradicated and you're holding your arms up like this at 60 degrees. Or you're doing stretch pose, which is where you're like boat pose, low boat pose, right? And you're holding yourself up like this, and then you do that, and that is actually really hard. We'll do that for a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's very hard because it's not a lot of oxygen, right? But there's a purpose to doing that.
So while you're doing the pose, you're. Wow, that's tough.
I hate it. Okay, no, that's a strong word. I don't hate it. It's not my favorite thing to do, but it's a challenge for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. And then another instructor, he'll push us too because he's my friend now. We do every week a cold dip at Lynn Valley every Friday.
I've been doing cold dips in the
the ocean
day in the sunset. Yeah,
it's nice, right?
At first it's challenging, but now I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to enjoy it when I'm in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the whole point. You just get over the stinging, right?
Yeah.
The initial sting, and then after you're fine.
The first 30 seconds, a minute, it's a little. But once you, like you said, once you reach that point, I swim to. There's like a little like those buoys out there.
Yeah.
So like by the time I get to the buoy, the cold shock is gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you're activating your body, right? Your body's, excuse me. Your body's being activated in a different way which it's not accustomed to, right? That's why the cold that's why the cold water dips and like the cold water healing the cold water therapy is very meaningful for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, I actually call it like when I'm walking out there, I look at the water and like you get a little nervous or like there's sometimes you don't want to do it. Like the act of doing it for me, that's the most challenge. Like it's like just okay, like let's do this thing. And so like when I'm walking, I'm looking in the water, I'm like that's my therapy. You know, it's really if you can calm your mind when you're out there, that's really amazing. Like when you're out there and you're cold and then you just calm the mind, like it's okay. It's okay.
No, and then it shows that how you'll handle yourself in other stressful situations, right?
Yes.
Because it's like, especially when you jump into the cold water, it's a shock, right? But it's a good way to condition yourself. So then when you get shocked by other things in life too, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. I've only been doing this for 2 months ish, maybe 3, something like this. So I can't say how it's gone to other areas of my life, but I'll be curious when I have something like that.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, you should when you're ready, maybe
Yes.
not during this winter time right
Uh-huh.
now, but you're more than welcome to join us when we go to Lynn Valley because that's colder.
Colder. Okay.
It's glacier water,
Okay.
so it's like 2 degrees, 3
Yeah.
degrees, and it's you know
Yeah. It's tough,
it's
right?
tough. It's tough, but again, once you get through it, right, and then once you get past all that, it's just like this. You have this like glow. You just feel
Yes.
good. You can feel this like very very refreshing, very just vibrant energy around you, like coming from your body. You just feel so great, you know.
I have the same experience. Like if I do the cold plunge,
Mm-hmm.
then I warm up my body,
Mm-hmm.
and I do some yoga afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Then I just feel amazing for
Mm-hmm.
hours.
Yeah,
Like for hours. Like it's wild.
it is wild. Yeah.
I uh
So
I was telling someone, I'm like, I know it seems crazy to say, but like I just feel like after out of the water, like my immune system, it's like functioning better. Like
mhm.
it's a weird thing to say, but I feel that for some reason.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's how you feel too, because it might not be the best for some people,
Mm-hmm.
but for others or for many people who are who are taking the challenge, who are taking the plunge, it is very beneficial, you
Yeah,
know.
oh,
So
100%.
like I was saying with my friend there, he's been into so many accidents, and he's a Kundalini yoga instructor, but he's been in so many accidents, and he says that going to Lynn Valley, like at least once a week. He
Mm-hmm.
goes twice a week, but he does at least once a week. He says, he's like, that's the best medicine that I've ever had. It's like because he's been to like acupuncture, he's been
Mm-hmm.
to massage therapists, and they all had their level of purpose
Mm-hmm.
for him, but it never got deep like cold water dipping, especially in Lynn Valley where it's glacier water. It's like really cold, right? So for his injuries, that was good because he's like it's activating for the central nervous system for him. It's
Mm.
just so activating, and it's just like it's exercising his nerves. It's really getting in there because I don't know what it's like to be in so many car accidents like him, but he says that he was like bedridden for years. He's
Wow.
a lot of pain, right?
Yeah.
So I would take his word over
Mm-hmm.
over a lot of other people, especially when it says, "Oh, go to acupuncture, do this, get some drugs, things like this," because that only do so much until you actually need something more holistic,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I had not quite that experience, but a similar one, which was I used to be pretty hunched over, right?
hmm
And so when I started exercising more, right, I started getting a lot of pain on my shoulders and my back
hmm
because my posture like this, and then I'm growing those muscles which were activated like this, right?
yeah,
And so I was going to the like acupuncture, massage, yoga, and still I'll wake up every single day and I'd still be just in pain and
hmm
but when I started doing the cold plunges, like that greatly reduced the pain. I was like significantly, like I was like, oh, like I don't really have that ache back there now, and then I'm able to now focus on my posture more, but also now that I'm growing the other muscles because of the cold, it
yeah.
doesn't hurt as much, so I'm seeing improvement, right?
That's
So
good. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
yeah, so like it's been a wild ride, but like for me personally, it's been great. The cold,
That's good. Yeah,
yeah,
that's good. I think that's what most people say afterwards. There's the ones who say, "No, I'm not. This is not me."
mm-hmm,
It's because they don't want to do it, or people are just like, "Yeah, it's very beneficial. I really enjoy
yeah.
it." So,
I mean, like again, when I'm looking at the water every day, I'm like, I like mentally, like my body is like, I don't want to do this, but
mhm,
mentally, I'm like, it's good for you.
exactly.
And one interesting thing is your mental state changes almost immediately. Like
hmm
before I do it the first thing in the morning, and I'm groggy, right? And then my head's not working right, and as soon as I dip in the water, like that cold shock happens, and I just start swimming, and
hmm
like it's like I'm not thinking about anything else other than I have this huge amount of energy just to start going,
Yeah.
and like it's wild.
And especially right in the morning, that's just activating everything in a state of, if I'm not mistaken, alpha brainwaves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're like conditioning your body to you're conditioning your body to function in this way, like on a deeper level. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Very cool.
yeah, man. So
I'm happy that you're doing it for you. Like that's good for you.
well, thank you. Yeah, I feel like especially with cold water plunges, it's always for us, right? So and the same with Kundalini too. So yeah.
So back to the Kundalini.
Mhm.
We were getting into what your average practice looks like.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like the breath work and all that stuff. It's the breath work within it, the stretching, but then a majority of it is meditation, and even with some of the instructors there, it's
It's what?
gong bath and crystal bowls.
Okay, what gong bath? That's the
So it's yeah, basically will take about depends on which class, like 20 to 30 minutes,
uh-huh.
and the instructor will they'll have like three different gongs,
Oh, the gong.
the
I see
gong,
it.
and then
Yes.
they'll just have these instruments that can make certain sounds, and it's
Yes.
just gong bath, but it's an auditory bath where
Ah.
throughout the exercises and the exercises and the breath work, we will end in shavasana for 20 to 30 minutes, and then they'll do the gong bath and crystal
Really?
bowls, and it's just a very healing part of it as well too, of the whole practice, because it's like you're doing all this work, you're activating the Kundalini, right, through kriyas, which is just a set of exercises that are meant for Kundalini activation, and then you sit in that to embrace it, to
I
really
see.
cherish what just happened on a subconscious and spiritual level, right?
And so, like, what effects do you have?
Oh, my central nervous system has been definitely been reconditioned. Right,
Really?
like I find myself a lot more calmer, more conscious, more self-aware in situations that
Mm-hmm.
would have normally triggered me, and it's just such a meditative practice, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we also do mudras, so that
Okay.
mudras, right?
Uh,
Like
I tell me, yeah.
they're like hand positions
Okay.
for different purposes. Like
Okay.
it's like it's in yoga,
Yeah.
all very ancient yoga practices, right?
Okay.
So
Yes.
you've seen some,
Like this.
like this,
Yes.
and then there's other ones where we'll go like this, and then we'll
Yeah.
like this, and we'll just meditate
Okay.
because it's meant to activate.
Interesting.
Yeah, because of the different energy sectors of the body, and then different elements in the body as well too. And so when we do these, it all comes together, right? And especially
Mm-hmm.
if you go in with intention as to why you're coming to Kundalini, like what was your main purpose, and then
Mm-hmm.
you bring your intention, your own unique intention into the class, then you're going to be then it's going to bring out that deeper level to you, especially as to why you started to begin with, right? Mine was just healing, and yes, that's a very loaded generic term.
Mm-hmm.
But then once I started getting into it and the classes and what they had to offer, I just started to realize, I'm like, okay, well, there's a reason why I had been triggered in certain situations, because I've done a lot of the mind work. But when it comes to trauma, especially, there's the programming within the body, central nervous system. And this practice really gets in there. At least for me, it has, and many other people who have joined as well too. It's just this activation within the body that gets in there on a deeper level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meditation and mudras and the gong baths. It's just that healing on that deeper level within a person's body, right? I feel
Yes.
like it's not like an end all, or
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what I mean? It's not like
Yeah.
a end all. It's not like a complete healing process for everything else. I think
Sure.
it's a good modality to add into your regimen of healing,
Mm.
right? And this was just kind of like that next chapter for me, because at Oxygen it wasn't calling to my soul.
Mm.
This was, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you've heard of Carl Jung, right?
No.
So he is like one of the he's like one of the grandfathers of modern psychology in his own way. He did a lot of work around the soul
Mm-hmm.
and individuation and the subconscious mind. So he was a lot more meditative and in depth with the human consciousness, right? Anyway, he was talking about Kundalini in some of his books, and even wrote a book about it when he had lectures about Kundalini yoga. And he was from like the early 1900s. So he obviously explored Kundalini for a reason, and he found a reason as to how it was integrated into just subconscious work and like individuation and shadow self, things like this. I don't know too much about his work about it. I've
Mm-hmm.
just heard it in some of some excerpts of his book
Okay.
and what he's written that I've read, and he mentioned it, and it was kind of like a seed planted. But it wasn't until I actually did some psychedelic therapy with 5-MeO-DMT,
Mm-hmm.
where after a few trips of 5-MeO-DMT, and I really found more depth within me, and I experienced the ego death. Like I
Yeah.
let go of a lot of things through these experiences. It wasn't until then, which was earlier this year, that I finally that seed sprouted, and it was just like, why don't you try Kundalini yoga? It's always been there, but it was never
Yeah.
really. I don't think I was ready for it at that time because I read about it. I'm like, okay, well, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I went through that psychedelic experiences, that was when Kundalini finally, that seed sprouted. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go do it. And then I found that studio.
Interesting.
Um,
Yeah, like what I can tell you is the last time I saw you was on the beach, right? We met through
yes.
text, and we got a coffee and went to the beach.
Yeah.
And you said you're more calmer now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that energy.
Mm-hmm.
Like you seem just more at ease for.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
it. It's not hard, or sorry, it's not easy. It's not easy, right?
No, even for me, like for my own stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
as I get older, that's one thing I notice is I just get more calm as I get older.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it takes practice, right?
Of
It
course.
it doesn't come naturally unless you focus on it, self evaluate.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
And when you actually understand your emotions too. I think that's
Yes.
one key because it's like there's going to be people who are more susceptible to certain types of emotions and feelings,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some people may be prone to detachment or
Mm-hmm.
dissociation. Others may be more prone to anger,
Yes.
right? I was more so the latter. And it's just all about, I mean, once you get older, you start to realize you're like, okay, well, why am I getting angry?
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose? Does that serve any purpose? Does that do anything? No, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So let me ask this question: when you're realizing that you're starting to get angry, right? How do you combat that?
Oh, I just go right into my body.
Right into your body?
Right into my body because I realized that my mind, when I used to get angry,
Mm-hmm.
my mind was in control.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when all these, you know, all these cognitive distortions and all these beliefs or all these thoughts, these programmings are coming into mind. Oh, they did this because of this, and oh, this happened because of this. This
Mm-hmm.
means something about me or something. Just all these like, all these, all these ridiculous beliefs. All these like, just just really unhealthy programmings based off of what happened to me in the past,
Okay.
right? And almost 99% of it is not true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when I think of something like if somebody says something wrong to me or if they look at me in the wrong way, right? Which is, I personalize, I take it personally.
Yeah.
It's just like, despite I don't even know them, it's all of a sudden it's just like that was like a personal attack, but it's like this person actually has no idea who I am. Why am I letting their dirty look
Yeah.
affect me?
And maybe it might even not be a dirty look. You might have interpreted it.
As a dirty
Yeah.
look.
Yeah.
And it's all about interpretation, right? But
Yes.
interpretation starts in the head.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, right? Depending if you're like, especially if your body's been programmed, but it like, I mean, obviously they work in conjunction, right? But those
Yeah.
beliefs, all that stuff, all this like personalization about this was a personal attack on me, that's in the mind because you're creating these beliefs in your head out of what? Programs, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I said, when I feel angry, I always just go straight in my body and I just feel my heart. I feel just here with myself.
So when you say you go straight in your body, like how do you do that?
Breathing.
Breathing.
And especially with my heart, I'll always just really put my focus into my heart because at Kundalini too, an instructor there has really helped me come back to my heart because he's just this very beautiful soul and he puts it so simply. He said that the heart is the source of it all, right? Because when you look at it, that's just that's us. That's the beauty of the heart. It's pumping blood. This is where we are able to speak. This is how we are able to function. If the heart's not beating, then nothing else can really work, right? But that's the whole. I know everything else comes together in the human body,
Sure.
right? We're sophisticated beings, but the heartbeat, it's just that's the vortex to the soul, right? And so when we can just come back to that beating heart, when you look at it from an objective perspective, that is the present moment. Because when you can focus in on the bump, like just that.
So do you actually feel the heart, like in Kundalini?
I
like,
try to.
Uh-huh.
It's hard. Like it's a practice, and I'm getting
Yeah.
much better at it. It's just about meditating. Like every morning and every night, I will sit with my heart and I'll just focus in on my heartbeat. Just that simple. It's that simplicity, because it's when you look at it, it's hard for people to stay focused on their heartbeat, because then they start trailing off. They start thinking of this. They start
Yeah.
thinking, what am I going to do tomorrow? Why can't I go to sleep? Blah, blah, blah. But if we can just spend 5 to 10 minutes just listening to the heart, just as is, that's like present moment awareness, right?
Yeah.
And even in Kundalini, they talk about shunya, which is the stillness behind your senses. So there's a stillness behind your senses, right? Where we can focus and we can be present in this moment. And I think that's the one key thing as to why I always go into my heart, is because when you think of like the beating heart, like boom, 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 that stillness in between the spaces of the heartbeat.
You
That's
try
the
to feel
stillness.
that?
Yeah, that stillness between the heartbeat, because there's a stillness there, right? Even when you think of our senses, what you're feeling right now, what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're tasting, what you're smelling, there's a stillness behind that. And that's us. That's still within us. It's like another layer to us. But because if we're interpreting the world through this sensory input and through our beliefs, then we're not with that stillness behind all that, which exists and it'll always exist. It's just a matter of how connected are we and how easy is it for us to get to that point of stillness to observe everything else that's actually happening. You see?
Yes.
And so that, honestly, that's the practice that I take whenever I feel any type of emotion, so I can just be present and just be here and look at that emotion, even if it's not anger, like sadness or shock.
Even happiness, like.
Exactly, because you don't want to allow that to metastasize into something like attachment or high expectations, and all of a sudden you're let down that, oh, this didn't happen,
Yeah.
which is so common for us, right?
For sure. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll think about this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, if you ever want to come to class, you can just let me know.
yeah, I'll definitely will, because I've been thinking about it, experimenting, and yeah, I want to. Can I ask about your DMT experience a little bit?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So my first question is, you said it was
5-MeO DMT.
okay. So 5
MEO.
MEO
DMT.
So how is that different than just DMT?
So the DMT, as far as I know, the DMT is the one with the what is it? It's like the one you have to break through, and it's like you've got those entities that you see or
Yes.
something.
Yes.
5-MeO isn't necessarily as visual if I were to deduce it from what other people are saying,
Okay.
because I've never done DMT.
Sure.
It's chemically similar, but it's still very significantly different. 5-MeO is a lot more intense.
Okay.
From the words of many people, including myself, it's like you get sucked into the heart of the universe, into God's heart.
Okay.
And then you come back. It's like an out-of-body experience. You get pulled out, and then you come back, and it feels like you've learned so much. It feels like it's been years, but really it's only been like 20 minutes.
Really?
And the first time that I did it, my friend, because I bought the little cartridge, and my friend's like, don't do it by yourself. I'm like, why not? He's like, because, just trust me. And he knows me well.
Yeah.
And he's just like, no, we'll do it together.
Yeah.
And then the first time I did it, I was violently puking.
Oh wow.
And I just kept puking. And then we did it again. I did it like 3 times that same night, like 3 different puffs. And yeah, I puked every single time. But he told me, he's like, you're purging. Because he even said, he's like, look at all this, look at all the shit you've been through. Your body hasn't really had that escape. Like, you haven't been able to escape your body to come back, like that out-of-body, the healthy out-of-body experience.
Okay.
Right? And of course, I'm not advocating for everyone to do 5-MeO. I'm just saying with a lot of people, especially who's been through a lot of complex and acute trauma, such as what I've been through, it was very beneficial because it got me out of my body, came back, and then when I did it a few more times afterwards, I eventually led me to that point of ego death, and then I started to differentiate between this physical reality versus the spiritual world. And it got me to really realize that this physical reality doesn't really matter. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. Especially when I put too much emphasis into my interpretations. Oh, this person said that, or this happened in my past, or this means this, blah blah blah. It really actually doesn't matter. It has no purpose unless the meaning that I give it, right? And it's really, yeah.
So what's the purpose that you find now? Like, if you're saying there's no purpose, like meaning here, uh,
Being.
being.
I
Yeah.
would say it's being. Like, of course, there's meaning here. Of course, like we still have to survive, and we still have a purpose for. Well, when we find a purpose in life, we still have to live out that purpose. I guess I could have worded it differently. What I mean is that all of our insecurities and our beliefs and what we think the world to be is usually almost false. If we think that world is evil because of the pain that we've been through, and our bodies are the inculcation. Our bodies, all these traumas have been inculcated into our body, into our central nervous system. All that is not true, right? Especially if you've been through such things like sexual abuse, and yeah, emotional abuse. Generational trauma that you can't even really understand because the lineage goes so far in your family tree. All that stuff doesn't matter. Like, your feelings do matter. I'm not saying that they don't, but what I'm saying is just the beliefs that we construct about the world and of that pain that dictate how we feel in this moment and eventually project into our future. All that doesn't matter because it's not the truth. If you've been through sexual abuse and you feel like you're worthless, that's not true. If you've been through some shitty relationships and people have cheated on you or hurt you and you feel like you're not worthy of love, that's not true, right? But we believe that because many people can fall and succumb into that belief because of what our body's been programmed, and that pain, especially if you've been cheated on or you've been through such tremendous betrayal from not only just exes but family, that becomes almost like PTSD symptoms in the body because you're just like, these are people that I trusted, especially when it comes from parents. These are the people that I trusted. Why am I being betrayed by them? They're the ones who gave birth to me. I thought they were supposed to love me.
Yeah.
So that can really have an effect on people, right? But then it becomes in the body. It becomes programmed in the body and not the mind, not just the mind anymore. So it becomes this cycle of like, oh, somebody gets triggered and they say, oh, okay, that means that I'm worthless. Because the body's already been programmed in that, right? Yeah. That's all false. It's not true. And we need 5-MeO, I believe, is very helpful for a lot of that because it gets you out of your body and it brings you back in. It gets you into the spiritual realm, back into the physical world. And when you kind of get the hang of it and you kind of go through it a few times, you're like, oh, wow, like it's all my beliefs and all this shit is not true. It's yeah.
So when you say you leave your body, like what do you mean? Like how is that?
It's like an out of body experience, and it's like like when I did it, and then when I did it, and then when I was coming back to it, it just didn't feel like this physical reality was real. I could still move when I opened my eyes. I could still move, but I wasn't there, right? And then it's like I said, because the ego is in this physical world. It's everything that we've constructed in this physical world, right? Excuse me. And then what happens is you just escape that for 20 minutes. And when you escape it, the reason why it feels like years, but it's only been 20 minutes is because you get out of this physical reality to another dimension where time and space doesn't even really exist. And then you come back, you're like, it feels like years, but it's only been 20 minutes, and you've just learned so much. You feel like you've learned so much.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So like, what it sounds like is when your eyes are open, like you're still in the world, but like when you close them, you go somewhere else. And like, so like, do you see things, or is it more feeling? Like,
it's more feeling. Like I never really saw anything.
Sure.
I just like, it was like just more like just like bright blinding light to me, at least, because
Really?
the way I did it was I covered my eyes and I put music in, and it's good to put like very like healing music of some sort, especially.
Yes.
And you go in with intention, right? Don't just go in just to like trip out.
Sure.
You want to actually do it, especially if you're on this healing path or if you're a spiritual person. You want to have some kind of intention going into it, right?
Sure.
So whenever I do it, I always have some kind of intention. I don't do it often anymore, especially going to Kundalini, but I was doing it a little bit, like once a month
Mm-hmm.
in the summer, which brought me over to Kundalini, right? But yeah, it was just going in with intention and then seeing a lot of things, because I remember one trip was where I went in to heal this very, very toxic and damaging relationship that I had come from with one of my exes
Mm-hmm.
a few years ago. And I remember when I came to it, I started to think of everything that she did, and I'm just like, it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. Like she's had her own pain, and it has nothing to do with you. But then that's when I began to build this very broad, very macro perspective of emotions. Because especially when you think of pain and trauma and things like this, our perception of reality becomes marginalized within these experiences. Like it's like you can only see the world to your feelings,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your filter of what this situation you believe the situation to be. So, for instance, if somebody cheats on you and you're not healing, well, you're going to think that all women or all men are cheaters,
Sure.
and then you're going to think that you're worthless. You're going to think that that had something to do with you, like I wasn't good enough for them, or for the most part, we'll just say hypothetically and generally, it's all women are cheaters, and she cheated on me because I was worthless, right? But that's not true, because everybody has their own past, right? But then when you look at it through like we're looking at it through our filter of that event, and then we'll paint the whole world through that filter, right? And that's not you don't have a broad perspective. You don't gain any range or breadth
Mm-hmm.
over the reality of that situation, is because we're just marginalizing our perception of it through that tiny little
Sure.
peephole of anger or resentment or feeling worthless,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, like I said, when I did the DMT and I did that, it brought me out of my body, brought me back in, and like when I was coming back into my senses and into my physical reality, that's when it's like I kind of seen the that fine line between this physical and the spiritual world. We're spiritual beings living in this physical reality, right? And very, very seldomly do we ever get that experience to actually go into the spiritual realm and look at things from that huge macro perspective that this physical reality isn't as significant as we think.
Okay.
So,
Did you feel anything like in that experience?
oh
Like
yeah, I cried.
you cried?
I
Okay.
definitely cried, because it just brought me out of that filtered like system that I have,
Mm-hmm.
right?
So did you feel like love afterwards or like
Understanding.
understanding?
I would say more understanding and connection as opposed to attachment and apathy.
Connection with people or
Just everything around me,
mm-hmm.
right? Because especially when I realize that it doesn't matter. Like my feelings matter, but they actually don't at the same time. It's that paradox, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it helped me understand that, okay, how can I look at her past and understand what she went through? And how can I actually look at it from a different perspective? And when I actually did that, when I actually looked at her past and I saw where she came from, how her dad treated her, how her first ex-boyfriend treated her, how her looks and society's expectations of her treated her, all these mitigating factors that came into play.
Mm-hmm.
And in her past, I've realized many things. I realized, well, one thing, I'm not even in that past. I have nothing to do with it. Two, there's no influence that I had over that past. Three, it's all these like complex situations that came together that she's not even aware of. And I've just realized, I'm like, okay, so then why am I taking this personally as to it determining my self-worth? And I just had no answer. I'm like, well, there's absolutely no reason. Just because she did this, it still doesn't mean anything, right? And I realized, I'm like, well, that's on me now. That's on me. It's just how I feel. And
Mm-hmm.
when I began to take accountability for how I feel, it's just like, okay, well, take accountability for it and surrender to it, but realize that you got to let it go, and don't let it dictate how you look at relationships and love and women. And I haven't. I don't generalize about women saying they're all cheaters, they're all this, which is what a common theme is, especially
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, all over the internet and certain types of toxic content out there, you know,
Yeah.
and it's about how a woman should be in their eyes, right? You know, that kind of content.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, well, that's when you look at it, it's just like all that is coming from pain because these women didn't match up to their standards. And so that's why it's just like they paint these pictures of how women are supposed to be, and just negating the fact that everyone has their own unique individual experience in life, and you can't dictate and you can't generalize and you can't say how a group of people are or entire gender is or how they're supposed to be because you had a few exes hurt you in the past. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that's something as I get older, I understand more is everyone has a unique experience on Earth, right? And in my experience doesn't negate yours. It's not better than yours or worse than yours. It's just my experience. And because of that, you're different people, right? Like me and you are different beings. And that's
Exactly.
okay. And we can learn a lot from each other. Like, yeah.
Exactly, right? And it's when you look at it, it's technically a logical fallacy when people generalize about an entire gender, right? Because then
Mm-hmm.
you're just like, oh, they're all like this. It's just like, have you met all 4 billion women to say that they're all like this? How do you know? You don't know.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
to negate, to generalize about them as to paint them to a one-dimensional belief or a linear belief about them, that is a logical fallacy because then it takes away from the actual logical fact that everyone is experiencing this world in their own unique way,
For sure.
right?
Or even with like one person, right? One experience you had with them, right? That's just one experience, right? It they're complex people themselves, right? And so they might be different with somebody else, right? Or
Yeah.
in a different situation the next day, right? Like
Oh yeah.
that's something to realize as well.
Well, yeah. You take for instance like when you go to like a concert or like a like a rave or a music festival, right? Even though we're all listening to the same song, every single person, even in your group, just say that you all like the same type of music, all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, everyone's going to experience it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever noticed that? Or even when you go see a movie with a group of people, everyone's going to experience it differently because
Sure.
they're going to be picking up on things that you didn't pick up. You're going
Yes.
to notice things that they didn't pick up, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be somebody who be like, I don't really like it that much, and another person's going to be like, oh, like he was great in this, and
Yeah, for
blah blah
sure.
blah. So that's our own unique experiences and how we are interpreting what we just saw,
Mm-hmm.
right? Despite that they're playing the same music and the movie is the same story, the actors, nothing changes as to, the movie that we're watching. How we are all experiencing it and watching it is going to be through our own filters,
Sure.
through our own interpretation.
Yeah, one thing it happened to me when I was quite young, like I'd say like 23, 24, is it was strange that my first experience realizing this was actually at my job.
Okay.
And we had this big group meeting with there was speakers and like hundreds of people there, and I walked away with maybe a negative opinion or something like this. And before I shared my opinion, I asked some people like, what did they think of it, right? And then they gave their opinions, and then I thought about their opinions, and then it altered my own, right?
Mm.
And so that's one thing that I've like learned is like before I react or I decide this is how I feel about something, talk to other people because it will change your perspective, or you can learn, or you'll influence them, or they'll influence you, right? Don't be so stuck in your ideas.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't be stuck in your perception of reality, right? Because
Yeah.
that's when you look at it and that's one thing too. Yeah. I mean, that I've learned too, especially I didn't learn it as early as you, so
Yeah.
hands off to you. This took me
Well,
about 34 years to learn this.
Well, like
But
for me, it was one small thing I recognized,
yeah,
and then I'm trying to expand that to other areas of life, right? But that was the first time.
that was the
But
first time,
it
right?
was the first time, but
Yeah.
I'm definitely not perfect in that regard. Like, I'm still being more open-minded. It's something I'm continually to work on.
That's good. And that's the whole point, right? Just
Yeah.
understanding that my perception of reality is mine, sure,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a fraction of reality, right? But
Yeah.
then we have, many of us, it's hard for us to understand that outside of just, our perception of reality, just a little speck, right? There's a reality that exists outside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to what I was saying earlier, right? If we're emotional, if we're looking at the world through that spectrum of anger, not looking at the reality that exists outside of it, we're negating all these other mitigating and aggregating factors that exist. And that's why when sometimes, well, almost all the time, if we react in anger,
Mm-hmm.
we almost always regret it because it's just
Yes.
like, oh, like why did I do that? Because then
Mm-hmm.
another piece of information comes into play, or you start hearing about what another person experienced in that situation, or you negated another aspect to that situation. You're like, ah, fuck, I shouldn't have done that.
Sure. Like I know, like
Yeah.
one thing for me, it's how much my perspective changes just on one night of rest. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't matter like if I was angry or if I was happy or if I was sad or whatever the emotion was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fear, anxiety, whatever. And then the next morning happens and I'm in a different state. And then I'll look just like, 12 hours before and
Mm-hmm.
I have a different state when I wake up,
Yeah,
different perspective.
because you sit with it, right?
Yeah.
You're sitting
Yes.
with it. You're not letting it dictate anything outside of that situation because you just sit with it. You're like, okay, this is how I'm feeling. Let me just sit with it. Don't react to the situation. Just let it sit for a bit. Let it calm down,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because in the heat of things, like we're all human, we're gonna feel emotions,
Yes.
and then we're gonna filter it through whatever mental filters that we may have about the world, which then in turn transposes into how we feel. Because emotions are like still, it's just the raw data
Mm-hmm.
of a situation, right? Excuse me.
You're fine.
It's the raw data, and the feelings are what it's a dilution of those raw data, and then we start making our stories up or beliefs and all these things, and that's how we feel. And so that's where things get lost in translation, especially because if we react to that, well, that's where feelings get hurt. That's where other people get hurt, and that's where we regret, make choices that we wish we didn't make.
Yeah.
So,
That's one thing that I struggle with. Like, you were talking earlier, like, how when you think of someone else, like you'll be angry at them or why they do this. But like for me, one thing I struggle with is like reflecting negatively on your past things that you've done.
hmm
Right, like I'm not proud of everything I've done in my life, and sometimes I get fixated. Like, why did I do this one thing? And I'll focus on this one
mm
thing, or feel really bad about that one thing for a really long time.
mm
And learning to just accept that, and that, okay, I did one thing bad, but it doesn't make you as we all do things bad, right?
hmm
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Well, would you find that do you find any kind of practice has helped significantly when it comes to accepting those
Yeah.
situations?
So it's something I still work on. I still
Right.
struggle with, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to have a much more positive outlook
Mm-hmm.
on just life in general. So
Mm-hmm.
like, just be more positive about things.
Mm-hmm.
That does a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Also, uh, realizing that in the past, my self confidence or my self worth or uh, um, was low, right?
Mm-hmm.
And improving that,
That's
right?
good.
Like, so I used to like me as a person, I used to feel like I was a loser.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, I felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
For probably most of my life. I felt that way for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so correcting that mentality, right? Like no, you're not, or like
Yeah.
you did this one thing wrong. That's okay. Do the you're even focused on setting goals or like making small improvements on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then now that I do that, I can look back on where I was before. I'm like, oh, like I'm this new person than I was even a year ago. Like I reflect like the mental state I was a year ago.
Yeah.
And being able to see that, then you can focus on like, okay, like it just takes work. It just takes me putting in the time, whatever the goal is, right? Whether it's
Mm-hmm.
doing the cold plunging, right? Or yoga or your job or whatever your goal is, or emotional, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
a big one. Like
Yeah.
just saying it takes effort, consistent effort,
Yeah.
and then you can see the improvements.
Oh, 100%. And that healing and that
Yeah.
self-awareness or whatever you're working on, it's a minute-to-minute thing. That's what I noticed,
Yes.
especially even self-awareness and emotional regulation. It's a minute-to-minute thing, especially if you're out in the world. Unless you're a person who just sits in a cave with his fingers in his ears for the rest of his life,
Yeah.
which I don't think is plausible, right? Other than that, you're going to be a functioning member of society,
Yes.
or unless you're a hermit. But other than that, you know, more likely than not, we are functioning members of society. We're going to go out, we're going to interact with people, and the capricious nature to life is going to hit us. So we're going to interact with people and their feelings or what they think of us and what they say to us, all these things. So that's where it's just that self-awareness of being present and conscious, right? That's that every it's a minute to minute process. It's not easy, but when we can let go of any expectations, or we can let go of what we thought it was going to be or what we think it's going to be, you know, either in the past or in the future, and just be present, that's where our strength lies. That's where the reality lies, because you know the past has already happened and the future doesn't even exist, right? And so if we're always back, if we're back and forth between the two because you know, because our mom didn't give us enough love, or you know, in school we were bullied, or something like this, right? These are common things that can happen to people where these programmings then dictate how we function in the world, and then all of a sudden we're walking down the street, and again somebody looks at us weird. Oh, you know, it can trigger that whole being bullied or something. They're gonna punch me, or you know, they're
Yeah.
looking at me, they're talking bad about me. But it's like you just see them like kind of raise their eyebrow or something. You just randomly, you know,
Yeah.
hypothetically speaking, they've raised their eyebrow at you. It's just like, well, how do you know that they're talking bad about you?
Yeah. Maybe they're thinking something in their head.
Yeah, maybe they're just copying what The Rock did. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Smell what
Yeah.
The Rock.
Yeah.
You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
We don't know until we talk to them. Be like, why did you raise your eyebrow at me? It's be like,
Yeah.
oh, I saw somebody behind you who was driving like erratically, and if you didn't even think of that, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay. But then unless you actually, you know, like how you were saying, unless we go talk to people outside of our reality, we're not going to see that, and we're only going to see it through our perception of reality, which is usually emotional,
Yes.
especially with triggers and things like that. So
Something else I notice is, I notice it more and more is your mental state, like the energy that you project, greatly affects the interactions you have when you go out and you walk around, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're just in like a positive state, like you say hi to people, you're like, hey, how you doing? And if someone says hi, it doesn't say hi, you're like, okay. But like I just noticed that people in general, like even when they just like even maybe not interacting, right? They'll just smile at you more, or like that positive energy. People like they'll feel, even though it may not be like a verbal thing, right? Like it's
yeah.
I notice this a lot as I get older.
Yeah, because it's our energy. It's what
Yeah.
it's in our aura, right? Because if we're always thinking that the world is an enemy, and we inculcate that into our body, well, guess what? Then we're going to be paranoid of the world. We're going to like look at people in that way. Oh, what's this person going to do, or this, and then we're just going to transmit that energy, right? But as
Yes.
like you said, if we're positive, if we're happy, if we're present, especially, I realized, yeah, this is one thing like you as well too. I've noticed that when I'm present, especially even on the bus, or walking, when I'm just present, hence my shunya, like being with my heart, that helps, and that people can actually notice that.
How do you try to stay present?
I like for instance, like when I'm going to yoga, I like to test mudras like on the bus, and then I'll
Okay.
just like I won't listen to music. I won't look at
Yeah.
my phone, and I'll observe everything without focusing on anything. Like I do this one meditation. It's where visually, what I'll do is like I'll take the parameters of my peripheral, right? Like because you know obviously there's certain limitations that
Sure.
you can see and you can't see.
Yeah.
And I'll do it in a public place, and what I'll do is just like I'll just sit there, and I won't focus on anything, but I'll notice everything that's happening. And this is a good exercise to test your visual cortex, just to just to be aware of it, right? It's like a self-awareness exercise. And just being focused on nothing and just having your gaze just kind of like this, but then noticing everything that's moving without focusing on anything, because then you're being present. Technically, when you look at that exercise, you're being present with your what's going on visually.
Sure.
And it's more of a visual meditation. Regardless, though, it's to understand that there's so much around you that's going on, and you can't. If you focus on one thing, well, that's where your attention is going to go, and all your energy is going to go to that, right? And like when we were talking about what our energy is, if we're focused on the negative, well, we're going to transmit that negative energy. If we're focused on the positive, or if we're focused on being present, which is just a state of being,
Sure.
people will notice that, right? Because if people are always on their phone, things like this, but if you're just that presence of just pure consciousness in that moment, where you're not attached to anything, you're not thinking about the past, you're not projecting into the future, you're just here, right? That's such a powerful energy. That's just such a powerful aura, because it's like very few people are actually present, especially
Yes.
in public, because we're looking at our phones, or we're walking past, we're looking at the cars if they're, you know what I mean, or the ducks or something, and things like this.
That's true. That I think I could benefit from this exercise, because I'm just thinking, like, often when I go off, or probably most of the time when I go out, I'm like focused on the just the thing in front of me, right? Like whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
if I'm walking somewhere, or if you're on your phone, or if you're walking with your dog, or talking to someone, but you don't really realize uh, everything else. Like I can't tell you, like, how many times, like, just walking on the different side of the street corner, I'm like, I didn't know that shop was here, like, and I walk this street, lots and lots of times, or like you don't notice, like, the structures of the buildings, or this tree, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Exactly there, right? Yeah, you
Yeah.
just start picking up on the small things, right? So, and of course, like when you're like talking to somebody, of course you want to focus on what's in front of you, right?
Yes.
Because you want to give them your
Sure.
undivided attention and be present with them, right?
Yes.
So that's a little different.
Yes.
But if you're walking, just say if you're just walking and you're like, okay, I don't have any obligations right now. I'm here with myself. Let me just walk. Another exercise I like doing is just walking and feeling just the nuances, the intricacies of my body. So like the joints. I mean, it's a hard practice, but the joints, my knees, and like when I'm walking, it's like, okay, like just these very, very minuscule movements when you're
Yeah.
walking, right? But that's as well being present. You're being present within your body, and then just walking. And if you want to do that with your body, you could do that with your vision, your peripheral, when you're walking, just like walking, be like, okay, all these things are happening, and my eyes are gazed in front, but I'm not focused like, like a psychopath with my eyes like this, just in front,
Yeah.
but just kind of like you're casually walking, and it's in front of you, but you're noticing everything. Like I do that too when I drive, like when I take an Evo, or if I drive
Yeah.
somewhere, yeah, my eyes are in front, so I
Sure.
make sure I don't rear
Yeah.
end someone.
In that situation, you have to be, right?
Exactly, but then I do tend to put my complete focus on the peripheral, so I see everything. So it's almost
Yeah.
like if something comes out, then it's like I will, because when you're a good driver, you're going to know when you have to do something, right? But if you're a very defensive driver, you're going to be like, oh, I don't know if this person's going to do this. You kind of focus on the defense as opposed to being offensive, where it's like, you know what I mean? So it's kind
No,
of like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's like that balance, right? So it's good to just be aware of everything without focusing on anything, because immediate danger, your body's going to know.
Sure.
It's just gonna know. It's just gonna know. Your body's gonna react accordingly. Because if something like if a car is coming out in your peripheral and you see that, then your mind's just gonna naturally focus on that, and it's gonna do what it has to do.
Yeah.
Right?
So when I first started driving, I had the tendency, or like almost absolutely, I would look maybe like 5 feet in front of the car, right?
Okay.
And it was so, like, I was stressed the whole time. Because I'm just looking here, and then one day, I don't know why, I just looked up, and just I saw more, right? Like now I don't see 5 feet in front of me. I can see a long way, and I see other cars and stuff. And one, the stress went way down
Yeah.
instantly.
Yeah.
Two, I was able to drive a lot better, right? Like driving between the lines was so much easier, because I could focus on something like in the distance. And it's not quite what you're saying, but it's similar in that opening your perspective to
Excuse
your
me.
what you're viewing more. Yeah.
Exactly, because yeah, exactly. It's just opening your perspective because we don't realize how powerful we are,
Mm.
right? And if we just put all of our focus and energy into one small thing, that's where that's where our attention will be put on, and that's where we'll channel on all our energy into,
Yes.
right? And so at least if we can just broaden our perspective, but then just bring that energy back within us, but be in the raw data of each of our senses, such as a visual
Mm-hmm.
cortex, where it's just like, okay, this is all happening, but there's no immediate danger. There's nothing that's going to affect me in this moment, especially if
Sure.
you're like, we'll just say, for instance, walking, right? You don't need to put your focus on anything around you, right? You're just walking, but if you're always like looking and scanning and just like looking at everything, then you're not really being present, you know?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, you can be like if you're like appreciating like the flowers and then
I
you
know.
walk,
Yeah.
like you know what I mean. But if you're always like worried about people or like, you know, things like this, then you're not really being present, right? But then if you can just like walk and just like have your eyes gaze, but then just kind of notice everything around you without focusing on anything that's happening, then you're just being here in this present moment within yourself and just, you know, enjoying the moment,
Yeah.
right? So,
Very, very interesting.
yeah,
I'll try this out on my own.
yeah.
I'll let you know how it goes.
Okay, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
How did you learn that? Or
I read it. I read it in a self-awareness article. I'd have to find it again, but I just remember reading it a long time ago. I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. And this was during the pandemic too, so I had a lot more time. And I'm like, okay, this is when I was doing a lot of. I was studying therapy and like coaching and stuff, and just doing a lot of like reading, a lot of like introspective work, especially right, especially towards my inner child. And yeah, I just came across these exercises, and they were sensory based exercises that really help a person come back into their body. That's the whole purpose of it. And when you look at the senses that we have, when we can come back and just exercise these senses, then we're being present with ourselves. We're coming back into our body, and we're able to interpret and process the raw data of things that happened around us, right?
yeah.
And from that raw perspective, as opposed to what's being filtered in our head of our beliefs and insecurities and our past, right? So, and again, I feel like those meditations have really helped me understand the raw data of what's happening around me as opposed to what I think is happening around me, right? Because there's a huge difference than what it is versus what I think it is.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's that's huge, right? Like you're saying, whatever event happens, like there's an accident, or like let's just look on like there's an accident. Everyone that accidents can have a different perspective of what happened, right? Because like you said, there's only a person's brain can only capture in so much information, and then you have to process it, and then your brain has to make a judgment of what happened. But it's gonna be different than yours, right? And so my perspective isn't 100% accurate, but neither is yours.
Exactly, right? But it's 100% our perspective,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
but it's not the complete truth either. It's a
Yes.
fraction of the truth. And then, as long as we can, you know, for instance, when you say an accident, we can
Yeah.
give our raw perspective without any like equivocations or without any filters and things like this, then it helps, you know, for instance, the investigators, right? And especially if there's like video and all that stuff, this is where it's like, you know, insurance.
Yes.
That's why these things are so complex. Like a simple
Yes.
car crash becomes a very complex situation
Sure.
after the fact, right? And so and that's another thing too that many people are I'm still sometimes guilty of, is oversimplifying things. And I have to always bring myself back to that macro and just being like, this is so complex. Like I can't, like life doesn't have to. It's interesting. I was having a conversation with my friend. Life isn't complex. People are complex. We don't have to be, but we are. So it's just that striking that balance that like life doesn't have to be complex, but when other people are involved or when something such as that happens, that's where we have to go into the complexities of things, right? But also understanding ourselves, we have to understand that we are complex. But once we can like understand the complexities and then like go over the complexities, then we become more simpler, because it's just like how Buddhism talks about. It's not about learning; it's about letting go
Okay.
of everything that you once thought you knew.
Do you read or practice Buddhism a lot, or?
I follow the principles.
Uh-huh.
I don't necessarily. I've been kind of turned off because of the situation that happened in Myanmar. because it's a primarily Buddhist country,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very very Buddhist country where they follow the principles, but there's just a lot of like political stuff. I don't want to get into that, but
Sure.
I'm more practice, and I appreciate the
Mm-hmm.
principles.
Sure.
Likewise, I do with Taoism. Those two, we'll say, philosophies or
Yeah.
Eastern religions have really made it's the fulcrum of how I live my life.
Okay.
Because it's basic, like live your life through harmony.
Yeah.
Don't hurt others, things like this.
I've
Right.
I've also noticed I assumed you were a Christian
Hmm.
because I think on your back
Yeah.
you have a cross.
At one point, I was a Christian, but I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm definitely not. Like I respect and I understand the essence of what Jesus was saying,
Mm-hmm.
but I do not respect the church because for me, that's two different things. And
Mm-hmm.
I definitely don't respect a lot of Christians, just because it's just like it's a lot of it. I mean, for me, organized religion is just more predicated off of fear and emotions and manipulation. I'm not saying every single one of Christians are like that. I'm not generalizing. I'm just saying that the ones that I've run into,
Mm-hmm.
they've haven't been the kind of people that I'd want in my inner circle, we'll say.
Okay.
Right? With the very least amount of judgment. Obviously,
Mhm.
I still am judging, and I could admit that. But those values, we'll say, like the values of what the essence of what Jesus talks about, and the metaphorical meaning behind the Bible, I respect. People who take it literally and then who try and force their beliefs on other people, I don't. You know.
Okay.
So, yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, where do you fall now? So your belief system, like.
I'm I'm not against any of these religions and the essence of them, right? They all have their own purpose.
Sure.
Especially when I've met people who are Jewish. I've met people who are Islam. I've met people who are Christian, and there's still people who I do enjoy speaking with, and I would align with, who are actually Christian and Muslim and who are Jewish, because they come from a much more authentic place when it comes to the essence of their religions. And I've been noticing that lately because I've been very interested in the mystical aspect of these religions. So I've been interested in the Kabbalah when it comes to Judaism. I've been interested in Sufism when it comes to Islam. I've been interested in Tantra, which is more towards Buddhism and Hinduism. And so these aspects, like the mystical aspects to these religions, are, in essence, this is a little bit of an understatement, but in essence, it's about having that closer relationship to God.
Mm-hmm.
And even with some of these mystical branches of these religions, some hardline traditional people or traditional followers of these religions don't like the mystical aspects of these branches. Like, for instance, when it comes to Islam and Sufism, there are some hardline Muslims who don't respect Sufism because they think it's almost like witchcraft.
What's Sufism?
Sufism is just it's a branch of Islam, of Sunni Islam. I believe. Sorry, I shouldn't say it's just a branch of Islam that is the mystical aspect to it, where it's just bringing a person to a closer relationship to God. Realistically, again, this is kind of an understatement.
Sure.
But yeah, that's what it is. Like, Rumi? You've heard of Rumi's poems? Have you heard of?
No, I'm sorry, my friend.
No worries. No, don't be sorry. It's all good. It's all good. I'll send you some. But
Okay.
he's a poet from like the 11th or 13th century, one of the like very, very from a long time ago, and he writes these beautiful, like just very beautiful, like sayings. Like, for instance, one of the ones he wrote that I enjoy that always stuck with me was, "You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens," and I never understood what that meant
Breaking your
until.
heart until it opens.
Well, yeah, like what do you think that means?
Um. So, my first gut reaction would say it's you have to go through pain or like break your heart, in order for your heart to like open to love, or like
Exactly.
this is how I would guess.
Exactly. That's basically the essence of what he was talking about, right? Excuse me. And like for me, when I first heard that, I heard it when my mom was in the ICU after she had a heart attack, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And when I heard that, I didn't get it. I deep down inside, I knew what it meant, but in that moment, I didn't get it. I'm like, what does this mean? You know, like, because like I'm going through this pain with my mom and all
Yeah.
this stuff. And it wasn't until about 2000, it wasn't until about earlier this year, ending of last year, I started to realize, I'm like, oh, that's what it means. You know, like all this pain, we have to learn from it. We have to understand why it happened. What did we take from it in order for our hearts to just completely open up, right? Because when it comes to many traumatic situations and painful experiences people go through, they just close up. They become
Yeah.
they become callous, a callous version of themselves, a shell version of themselves, where all they're doing is reacting to the world, and they've got this protection. They build these walls around themselves to protect themselves, right? And instead, that's what Rumi was talking about. Is just you have to open your, you have to keep breaking your heart until you're completely open, and it's just like nothing can affect you, because then you're just pure love, and you go out to the world understanding that everyone's going through their own pain, but it's not going to affect who you are. It's not going to affect your love for the world, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's where I stand with we'll say religion and all that. You know, I'm not against it. I used to be. I'm not anymore. I'm just more against the manipulation and the followers who believe that the manipulation is justified. So,
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I know that's kind of personal, so I appreciate you opening
that's
up
okay.
about that. Yeah.
That's what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very cool. So you're writing a children's book.
I am.
So what's the premise?
So the premise is it's interesting because it's going to be me before I was sexually assaulted. So that's what I'm writing it about. In a nutshell, it's the ideal version of what I wish my childhood was. And so I'm basically, it's going to be it's a fantasy book where this is what I wish I had been through before the world started hitting me, before I started experiencing very traumatic experiences. And the premise is this young boy who uncovers two invisible pets that he has that he doesn't really understand yet. It's a pet dragon and a pet robot that exists within him. And the pet robot represents his logical mind, and then the pet dragon represents his emotional mind. And he's trying to understand who they are, and he's also going through things in life that he doesn't know how to process completely, but his parents are supporting him. And as well, too, he's learning how to build a relationship with his thoughts and his feelings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you say it's like what you wish you knew before you went through all this stuff.
Yeah.
So I think what you're getting at is like the emotional side and the logical side. You wish that was more developed.
Yeah.
You wish you had more the skills or the learning around emotions and logic before you.
Exactly. Yeah. I wish
Okay.
I had the tools. I wish I had the discernment. I wish I had the self-awareness and the support system of my parents to have helped me become aware of it and teach me that, right? And so this is just my idealized version of what I wish my childhood would have been. So then my goal is for parents to see that and for them to be able to provide that for their kids.
Okay.
That I didn't get as a child, you know.
And so, what's the name of the book?
It's Timmy's Invisible Pets.
Timmy's Invisible Pets.
Yeah. I mean, I know I might have to work on that. It's not the final one. It's just
yeah.
like working with it. I'm still working with the editor too, so we're going to figure out probably a much more, dynamic name, but for now that's what it's called.
For now, I like it. Like could the name be different? Sure, but right now I like it.
Yeah.
Or maybe just Invisible Pets. I don't know. Like
Exactly. Yeah, just something, right?
yeah,
But it's definitely not the final. But here's the thing: it's definitely not the final book either.
Yeah. But by the final book, you mean of this particular book?
Of anything, yeah. Because I'm gonna leave it indefinitely as to it being over or having the end of it. Like I actually have a bunch of series and ideas for other books that are gonna be really focused on certain things, right? Like I plan on writing excuse me. I plan on writing series of books that'll be around cognitive distortions and just all these other things that I've learned through therapy and
Sure.
learned about psychology. So just the simple aspects to how we process the world, our thoughts and our feelings, and do it in a way, in a creative and imaginative way for kids to understand. I'm not going to be specific, I'm not going to be
Yeah.
technical, but I'm also going to have a part of these books where the parents, it's going to have the technical sides of the parents know what's going on, but the kids are going to be seeing it into this imaginative way, so then
Uh-huh.
they can learn it that way. And then when they get older, and then they start understanding these technical stuff and the logical stuff, and they become older and, through
Sure.
life, then they'll look back on these books and be like, oh, that's what it was teaching me. That's my goal. So it's like it's more of like that subtle way of
Sure.
showing them in a way where they remember
Yeah.
and be fun and be creative. So then it's like when they get older, they'll be like, oh, I remember those books, and then be like, oh, this is what it's teaching me,
Nice.
right?
And for that, you would need a series for sure, because I don't think one's going to do it. Like, you're going to need a series of books
Exactly.
to explore all the subjects in a very like, if for children in a brief, concise way. Like,
Exactly, and
yeah.
a creative, metaphorical way, and that's why it's going to be Timmy's
Yeah.
journey from childhood into all these years of learning about all these things once he starts growing up.
Yeah.
And then it's obviously it's eventually kind of come to an end, the whole series, but there's just going to be all these books that are going to have different focal points and different modalities that I'm going to teach about, or that I'm going to share and show
Yeah.
and write about. So then, and experiences, things like this. So then when kids read it, they'll be like, oh, what does this mean? So then they can learn about it in a healthy way. So,
When do you think your book will be completed?
I'm looking probably in the next 1 to 2 months. Like I says with the illustrator, I don't know exactly when he's
Sure.
going to be done yet. We've come to an agreement, but I know he's very busy, so we're going to discuss that. I also have to talk with the publisher and see what they need from me. And plus the expense of the publishing too. It's going to be at least a few $1,000s. So
And how many books will that publish? Like,
I'm not too sure. Like I'm pretty sure it's just going to be I think when people request it, I think
oh,
if
I
I'm not
see.
mistaken, because I was
Okay.
reading at one of the pillars that I could choose for publishing, and the one that I was looking at is the one where it's just like it'll be print on demand. That's what I was looking
Okay.
for. Print on
It
demand.
has to be a lot cheaper than, like, we're gonna make 5,000 copies, and then you're trying to.
Exactly, and I feel
Yeah.
like I'm gonna just take it step by step. I'm not gonna have high expectations, and I'm not gonna think like, oh, it has to do good, blah blah blah. I'm just gonna write the book to my best degree with my illustrations, publish it, see how well it goes, and I'm also thinking about giving it out for free to libraries
Yeah.
and children's hospitals, so then they can read it there
Sure.
and just get it out there,
Yeah.
right? Because
If you're donating, like, books that like, we can like, I can help donate there, like, I don't know, like, 50, $100, something like this. And on the podcast we'll say donation, like, we'll, like, if
Yeah.
when your book becomes published, let me know, and, like, we'll, like, I'll for the donation part,
Yeah.
for sure, we'll
I appreciate that.
I'll
man.
advertise that for you. Yeah.
Oh, for sure, I appreciate that. So,
Yeah.
well, even with like I wouldn't, even with like the donations, it's not like I would expect anything from people. I would actually
Sure.
just print the books myself and then just
Sure.
go give it to places where
Yeah.
it could get out there and parents can see it, kids can see it, and then other
Sure.
people in that um in that industry, right? For
Yeah.
children's development and children's products, because that's going to be my focus point, right? That's where I'm going to
Yeah.
actually sell it, and that's what I want to put all my energy into is children's development and children's emotional intelligence.
Very cool.
So, yeah.
Are you gonna make your website?
I am, yeah. It's I can say that I'm not slacking. I'm just having a hard time, and it's overwhelming because I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not a
Yeah.
visual person, and like, yeah. But I also have to realize that I can break things down, which is something I'm still working with. Break things down, and as well use ChatGPT, Google Bard to help me break all this down, and basically be my assistant,
Sure.
right? So, yeah.
Yeah, like, I'm the same way. I bought a domain. I need to
Yeah.
actually, like, I keep saying I'll do this, but I need to sit down and actually
and do it.
Make the website. Yeah.
Right. And I feel like with people like us, it's just about breaking everything down into smaller bite size.
Yeah.
Kind of like pizza bites.
Yes.
You remember
For
those?
sure.
What are those called again?
There something bites.
Yeah, I remember them. Yeah, but like we would put them.
I know. Yeah.
When
Yeah.
we do it like that, that's how I think. That's how my mind works. I'll just just break it into those bite size little pizza bites. So then it's easier for us to actually do this because
Yes.
if we just look at it as an entire thing, like
Mhm.
oh, it's a website and I have to do all this
Yeah.
stuff, then it's just like oh shit, and then you just kind of procrastinate or
For
you
sure.
distract.
It's
So
like I was talking to someone yesterday. It's not like making just small goals. Like
Mhm.
having goals in your life, I think is very important. It's something I haven't done well yet in
Yeah.
my life, but I recognize it's important, and I need to start making just small goals to keep you
course.
going.
Well, I mean, think of what you've progressed so far here, right? Like it's went
Yeah.
from, the one camera and the one microphone to this setup here, and then
Yes.
just think about what it's going to be like in the next year or two. Right?
Yeah.
You'll have a
Yeah.
bigger place, you'll have like, like you might not have the windows, but you know what I mean? It'll
Yeah.
just it'll materialize into something much more professional. Cuz this is already
Yeah.
quite professional at least in my eyes.
Yeah.
It's much more professional than what I had. So, or when I was recording stuff.
You used to record stuff?
I was recording stuff. I'm going to take a break from it because it wasn't materializing into something that was. It wasn't progressing into something that was going to go anywhere. I feel like, and it's because I actually wasn't focusing on my niche. So that's why I'm going to take a break from creating content and then go into affiliate marketing for
Yeah.
children's products, build an audience that way, and then go back to content if I have to. But I'm going to focus on blogs and the importance of emotional intelligence, and then like everything that is around emotional intelligence for parents to see this.
Yeah.
Studies and neuroscience and therapy and all these things,
Yeah.
modalities and articles like that, so parents can educate on themselves on that, and then find products that are catered to emotional intelligence, healthy self-image, consciousness, things like this, even spirituality, just for kids.
Yeah.
So then we can have a next generation of kids who won't become anxious because you know what I mean, because of how much they're on their phone, or they won't be anxious about their phone, or they won't be depressed because somebody rejected them.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they'll fall into certain things like this, but they won't take it in the way where it becomes detrimental and completely changes their worldview, and then they hate the world because an ex broke up with them, right?
Yeah, I think that's something that we don't do good. Like one thing, our educational system, and even my upbringing, something that I wasn't taught well was having the skills for emotional life, right? Like that's not something that we do.
Exactly. We weren't taught because we're in the. I'm pretty sure we're in the same generation.
Yeah,
What year were you born? Were you born?
I was 86.
Eight. Okay, it's the exact same age, right?
Okay.
So we didn't have that. I thought you were 87 for a reason,
Yeah.
but anyway, but we didn't have that. Nobody sat there and just be like, hey, like, well, at least for me, I can't speak for your experience,
Yeah.
but at least for me, it's just like nobody came up to me and was just like, hey, what are you feeling? Like, just sit with it, maybe squeeze your hands, like if you're feeling angry, or just like do something productive. It was always just, at least in my traditional family, I would just get beaten by like the spatula or the whatever, the belt, and then it at least in my experience, it made me believe that my emotions are not worthy to experience, or they are worthless, right? Like it's like you're not supposed to go through this. But then when I tried to resist it or fight these emotions, it just came out worse, right? And
Yes.
instead, it's like when kids experience things, we gotta, especially parents, right, and especially older people, not just the parents, but people who are supporting the kids and helping them raise them, teachers and alike, they need to understand that we must embrace the child's emotions, not embrace or accept what they're, if they're doing something unhealthy, but like if they're feeling something, sit them down and just be like, hey, like, what are you feeling? You're feeling angry. Okay, well, why? And just, I mean, it's not going to be there's not like a perfect strategy. There's not going to be this perfect way of dealing because every child is different, but in a way where we can just assess it and allow them to process it within themselves and let them know that it's okay they're feeling this way. It's not okay to hurt other people. It's not okay
Yeah.
to it's not okay to like, break things or do something destructive, but it's okay to feel it. And if you have to like, hit a pillow down, something,
Sure.
you know what I mean? Something
Yeah.
to cushion that physically, and just, or squeeze your hands, or like take a stress ball, something like this.
Sure.
We can teach them that, then it could be, those are preventative measures for them to it's preventative measures for the children, so then they don't react to their anger in a negative way when they're adults.
Sure.
Because it's like we're all emotional beings no matter who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And any person who says otherwise is lying, or they're just very
Yeah.
detached, or they're psychotic, right?
And even teaching, like you were saying earlier, how to mentally break down what you're feeling, right?
Yeah.
Like, so one, it's coping with it, but then two, it's, okay, I feel this way because X, Y, and Z. Well, what does this actually mean?
Exactly. What does it mean, right?
Yeah.
Or like, yeah, I feel X, Y, and Z. It's just like, okay, well, why? Oh, because this happened. Okay, well, why? Why is it really that bad? You know, and just really, because we all have a different reason. Like we all have, like, you know, we all have uniform emotions: anger, sadness, fear, grief, or whatever. But the reasons why we go to that, the systematic roots as to why we feel a certain way, that's what is different and unique with our own experiences, and that's where we as human beings have that ability to deduce and to really introspect within ourselves. It's just be like, okay, well, I was a very like, for instance, me, I was a very angry person because my mom was angry. I was beaten for my emotions, bullied, sexually abused, all these things as a child, and that painted this whole picture that the world is evil, and it was me against the world, which it's not true. I only created that belief, right?
So how did you come out of that?
Oh, well, I mean, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't. I would correct the wordage of what
Okay.
you said. It's not like I came out of it per se.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that what
Sure.
you're saying was ill intention. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that the way I would put it is, it's not that I came out of it. It's more that I accepted it as a reality that it had happened. You know, and that it's sure it's a part of me, but it doesn't dictate anything.
I see.
And I've learned and I'm grateful for it. As I mean, obviously, like, no child deserves to go through sexual abuse.
Yeah.
However, I'm grateful that it happened, because it would have never brought me here to who I am now and what I'm doing for myself. And I've learned along the way through all these very terrible experiences, right? That these happen for a reason, and there is always that ability to become bigger than these situations. You know, because if I allowed these situations to define me, well, I'm only as great as these situations and my emotions of these situations, right? So
Was there a catalyst or a person or an event
yes,
that?
there was.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to describe it if you don't want to.
Well, I mean, I don't mind getting into a little bit of detail.
Yeah.
It was when I got charged with gun and drug trafficking. As you already know, it was in 2018. I was caught with a loaded gun, and I was looking at a lot of prison time, and people were really mad at me. Everybody turned their back on me. They're just like, you know, get your shit together, like, what the fuck, all this stuff. They were just very mad at me. And there was a point when I hit that rock bottom where I was thinking about why this all happened. And instead, when I thought about who was in charge of who to blame, which I was blaming that sexual abuse, that's when I started to realize, I'm like, it's that. And then that's when I didn't do anything about it, because I wanted to do something very nefarious in that moment to the one who sexually abused me. But I'm like, no, that's not going to help. So I turned around, I moved out of the city, cut ties with certain people, and just really focused on myself. And eventually found a gig working with children, instructing hip hop with my friend after school programs while I was on probation, which really helped my image, because the person I was accused with and who I was caught in the vehicle with, he was not the most idealized version or a person of redemption. You know, like, he wasn't he was racking up a bunch of other charges on top of that. So that's why eventually the charges against me were stayed, because his only option for him, for the best outcome, because he garnered a bunch of other charges on top of the gun and drug trafficking charges that we had together, he had to take and plead guilty. His lawyer basically said, he's just like, you're in here for other stuff now. He's like, you better just plead guilty so then you can have a lesser charge. And so when he pleaded guilty, which included my charges, despite I was caught with the weapon, my charges were stayed. And what that means is that when charges are stayed, the prosecution doesn't have enough evidence to go forward. General sense, it's the prosecution does have enough evidence to go forward, and thus will leave it as is, and then after a year the charges are eventually dropped. So the cases drop against you. That was in 2021 for me. So the charges were stayed, and in 2022 they were dropped.
And that mental shift, is that something that you came up like, or I don't want to say come up with, but is that something that you worked through on your own?
Yeah.
Like it was just a revelation?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like
Wow.
I said, it was just that rock bottom when I was thinking about who to blame, but then when I changed that who to blame to me being accountable, right? That's when I moved out here to Vancouver, and I just completely changed my life around. And I cut ties with people, and I didn't look back. And
Wow.
my charges were stayed in 2020 and then dropped in 2021. That's what it was.
Wow.
But yeah, so then now I'm scot-free. I'm not on the radar, nothing. And I've just been going through therapy, doing all these modalities, Kundalini yoga, psychedelic therapy. I still want to do ayahuasca, things like this.
Yes.
Just go really deeper into myself. And I'm also planning on living in a monastery for a few months next year.
Really?
So,
What kind of monastery?
Buddhist monastery
Buddhist,
in Nepal, and just
In Nepal. Okay,
and cutting
wow.
society off for a few months, just because I
Wow.
really want to. Well, I want to embrace the Buddhist principles, and as well too, I want to actually just really go deep within myself.
That's very cool, man. Like, I really hope that goes well for you. I'm
Yep.
serious. I
Appreciate that.
really hope.
Yeah.
When are you planning on going?
March or April, we'll see when I can kind of get things into order, get all my book, like, you know what I mean? I want to get the book written. I want to get my website going and have that working as passive income while I'm gone. That's my goal. So then when I come back, then, excuse me, I can get things going from there, right?
Is that something you have to apply for, or do you just like?
You can, like, there's I'm looking at the different options right now because I've been doing a lot of research. Some places you can just go there and then they'll take you in. Other places you might have to pay. Excuse me. And then so that's why I want to exercise my options first before I just go down a route.
Sure, I think that's smart to do research ahead of time.
Exactly, and I feel like what I'll do first is like even though like I may pay for this one monastery, which really won't bother me. Like I don't mind paying for it and going there. I'll just go there, pay for it, and just hang. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Almost like just live there for a few months and then get to know the culture. And then when I go do it again afterwards, then I'll go back and then I can explore it on my own, kind of thing, right? So then, because I mean, going to a foreign country by myself is a little, it is a little nerve-wracking. Right?
Sure, yeah.
But
yeah.
also at the same time, I would like to integrate myself into the culture and just know it a little bit before I actually just go there blindly with no plans, right?
What brought on this idea to go in the monastery?
Life.
Life.
Yeah. I'm just like, you know what? Like I just really want to just really go deeper, Like I'm like I was saying earlier, like I'm not looking for answers out here anymore at all. I'm looking for things to fulfill my purpose, sure, like writing books, affiliate marketing, and see where that takes me. But I really want to just go deeper into my soul, just go deeper within and just really find more answers and uncover more layers to what and why I'm here and who I actually am,
I think that's very admirable, very smart, very. It's not something a lot of people in our culture today do.
Yeah.
Like we're so focused on external things or staying busy or whatever it is, that to do that self reflection,
Yeah.
right? It's not something we do a lot.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And it's obviously I feel like it could be for everyone, but not everyone will get there. And I mean, with all the major traumas that I've been through in my childhood, I think that's what really brought me to that point. Because even with like, it's funny, I talk to my younger cousins a lot and they're all like, oh, kuya means older brother. in Tagalog.
In what?
In Tagalog, which is
Tagalog.
which is Filipino language.
Oh, okay.
So
I didn't know if I always called it Filipino. No,
Oh,
it's
it's Tagalog. That's the main
Tag-
dialect. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I mean,
Yes.
Filipino, it's
Oh,
interchangeable
okay.
and it's okay that people say that, but there are different dialects. But it's the main one in Philippines.
Tagalog.
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 There you go.
Tagalog.
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 Yeah, there you go.
Okay, very cool.
So my cousins, they joke about it. They're like, Kuya, like you're, you go from this, former criminal to this monk who's gonna go on a monk journey, and I'm like, yeah. But then like I look at it with everything that's happened in our family, and like on my other family members, my younger cousins, and even my brother. Despite we were raised in the same household, I realized I'm one of the ones who had been through some really destructive stuff growing up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like I didn't realize I'm like, oh, like there was a lot that was going on within me, and that happened to me that not very many of my family members had been through, or at least that I know of. And that's one of the reasons why I actually want to embark on this journey, because it's like when you have all these experiences that happen and you start to realize that no answers out here ever gave you that solace. It never gave me inner peace. The only inner peace I ever found was within me. Yeah. And I just want to explore that more and more and just see what I can uncover.
And that's not an uncommon story of someone with a past going through transformation. Like that's like even the Bible, right? Like as a very common, like Saul to Paul, or
of course, yeah. A lot of these spiritual teachers, even Buddha, right? Like apparently Buddha went through a lot of pain. I don't know exactly what, but I've heard it from other people. You know? So
yeah. Well, very cool, man. Like I wish the best for you.
Thank you. I
Absolutely, in that regard. Yeah.
Appreciate that, bro. So
yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about or bring up or?
No, I think if you're all good with this, then
I really enjoyed this conversation, Alex. I really appreciate you being on.
I appreciate it, bro. This is a good conversation too.
And it's Timmy's Invisible Pets.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll keep you posted if there's any changes, because it hasn't gone through the ringer of editing and finalized yet. But that's just like the rough draft.
And we can advertise on the podcast too. So like, just let me know for sure.
I appreciate that, bro.
Well, thanks, man.
Thank you, brother.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you too, man.
Yes. So. See you, everybody. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.